Okay, hello chess players! Today we're going to be taking a look at the Sicilian defense, beginning with e4, c5, knight of 3, d6, and in a previous video I took a look at the Kopek system. Today we're going to be taking a look at the delayed Alapin with c3, and after knight f6 we're going to be looking at sort of a cousin to the Kopek system. It's got almost the exact same ideas. It's just a different way to play the delayed Alapin, beginning with this move bishop to e2. So one of the clever ideas behind this is after bishop to e2, we're setting up this little trap. Knight takes a4. We're going to have queen to a4 check, picking up that knight. And we're still basically trying to do the same thing with white. We're trying to play this pawn to d4 and build up this big center. So anyways, if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So for starters, obviously, we can't play knight takes e4 here. Knight takes e4, queen a4 check, knight c6, queen takes e4, and obviously white is winning. So we're not going to do that. So after bishop to e2, the main move is just pawn to g6. The point being that white can't play d4 right here because of knight takes e4. So white's intention is to set up a situation where he can play d4. But it's actually a little tricky, and it takes a few moves. But it is possible for him to do this without necessarily having to spend a move to defend that pawn on e4, because again, he has that pawn indirectly defended with the counter threat of queen to a4 check. So he can just castle, and then bishop to g7, and then he can spend a move to play something like rook e1, because obviously queen to a4 check is still on. Here we should castle, and now we're finally threatening to play knight captures e4, but white can play his bishop back to f1. Now this is by far and away the most popular way to play this system with the white pieces, or at least at the club level, at least when I see people play it at the club level. But already black is probably either equal or just close to equality, or maybe even, like, in a lot of cases, slightly better for black. Black just intends to play knight c6, and here it's still very difficult to play d4, and that's why I would say maybe even black's a little bit better here, because I don't see white getting in d4 in a healthy way in this position. If we were to play d4 right away, we would have cd4, cd4, bishop g4, and at the very least we could just declare this position completely equal. Once we get in bishop g4, we're putting pressure on d4. Everything's very, very awkward for white, and black has all of his pieces out. Everything is going really good, so this position should be considered at least equality. So d4 right away isn't such a great idea, so usually what white tries to do in these situations is he tries to preface that. He tries to prep it with a move like h3. This prevents bishop g4. This is another very common move that we see in the Kopek system as well, when people play bishop d3 and they retreat the bishop back to c2. In fact, really the only difference between this system and the Kopek system is the bishop is resting on f1 instead of the bishop resting on c2. So that's why I would classify the Kopek system as actually a little bit more dangerous. Having that bishop on c2, c2 is objectively a much more dangerous square than having the bishop just sit back there on f1. Of course, there's advantages to both. The advantage of having the bishop on f1 is it does defend the king side, and it's also out of the way from knight attacks or any attacks that black might get along the c-file. But after pawn to h3, black can just play e5. And again, at this point, it's very difficult for white to play d4. If he plays d4 right here, for example, he's opening the position before he's ready. And even though it looks like it's just sort of a Roy Lopez-esque position, and it is, white is also severely underdeveloped. And you'll note that white doesn't have his bishop on c2 like he would in the normal Roy Lopez. He's got his bishop on f1. All of white's pieces, for the most part, are on the back rank, whereas black is very well developed. That means that black can just open the position. He can just exchange multiple times in the middle of the board and open everything up. And when he plays rook to e8, it's actually very difficult for white to find a good move here. His queen is in the line of fire of this bishop and feels the need to get out of the way. But after a move like queen to d3, black is going to play d5, and this position should actually be somewhere between major to decisive advantage black because of the development lead. Once black eliminates his weakness like this with d6 to d5, white no longer has anything that he can point to and say, I have an advantage. And as a matter of fact, here, black should have the advantage once he eliminates the weakness, because black is the one that has the increased development, the increased mobility, and the overall better position. He's got his bishop on the long diagonal. He's got more of his pieces out. He's got this pin on e8 to e1, and it's actually very difficult for white to defend. I'm actually taking this from a game. This was played between Petrosian and Fedorov, played in Russia back in 2011, and that game continued knight to c3, d takes e4, queen c2, and then queen c7, and of course, it's not so easy to continue to play this position. White can't get his pawn back Black is just up a pawn right now, and black did eventually go on to win. So going back to this rook e1, castles, bishop f1, knight c6, h3 idea. After h3, black plays e5. So what should white do? There are, of course, other options. White can play a move like knight a3 and just delay playing d4. But if you take this route, black, of course, has the option to equalize himself in the middle of the board by playing the move pawn to d5. Now, once you equalize your space in the middle of the board, at that point, whoever has more development has an advantage. And in this case, it's black. So after d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5, as you can see, black has a little bit more space. As a matter of fact, this is like a Maroczy bind in reverse. Black is preventing white from effectively playing pawn to d4, and whereas black is only one move away from finishing his development with his last piece, it's going to be very awkward for white to finish his development. And of course, the knight on a3 doesn't look all that pretty. This position should be considered major advantage black, and again, this was actually taken from a game. I'm taking this from Arapethan versus Najir, played in Moscow back in 2010. And that game continued with knight to c4, rook to e8, pawn to d3, and then black made the mistake of playing b5, which allowed equality, apparently, after b5. He should have instead continued to restrict white's pieces and played a move like h6, and this would have continued to be some sort of advantage black, somewhere between, at least slight edge, but probably major advantage black. So black is doing very, very good here. So the question is, if you're playing against this type of system, where somebody plays this early bishop e2, what is the most dangerous thing that you're going to face when they play this early bishop to e2 move? How are other ways that they could play this here? And of course, there are other ways that they could play it. One way that they could try to play this is they could just say, you know what, d4 isn't going to work, so let's just go ahead and play d3. This is actually very reasonable. We have a game here between Aronian and Nepomniachtchi, and of course Aronian is a very good player, and of course so is Ian Nepomniachtchi, that continued with castles, bishop to e3, knight to c6, and then knight on b to d2, and then pawn to e5. So of course here, white just played d3, white got his development done, and he just declared that he was okay. And of course, everybody should be okay here. This position should just be somewhere around level. This game continued with a3, h6, h3, bishop e6, b4, cb4, ab4, a6, queen to b1, and then Nepomniachtchi played his equalizing maneuver in the middle. He played d5, and at this point, black should be perfectly okay. White's probably perfectly okay as well. The position is it's a chess game at this point. The position is just unclear. Anyways, that's how you face this bishop to e2 move. Just make sure you don't play knight captures e4 and lose your knight. Basically, the idea is just to play g6, bishop g7, and castle, and that's what you're going to do against most setups. And if they play d4 at some point, so if they play an early d4, you're going to have that cd, bishop g4 as an option. If they play d4 right here in this position, their pawn is still hanging, knight takes e4 as an option. And of course, if they play d4 before they're ready, after you've played e5, just go ahead and liquidate everything in the middle, and then liquidate with the move pawn to d6 to d5. And keep in mind that liquidating maneuver with pawn to d6 to d5, it is very, very important within the position. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.